Well, I'm Paul Ha, the director of Contemporary Art Museum St. Louis, and I am delighted that you're here tonight to meet the curator, Dominic Molon. And Dominic and I go quite far back, and he is incredibly respected and liked in the art world. And I was in shock when I was contacted by Dominic that he would consider a position here at CAM. And so we started talking, and we discussed the potential and possibilities of what he could bring to CAM and what we can bring to him, and it made perfect sense. So I am delighted that someone who's been quietly and consistently been putting together some of the best exhibitions in the contemporary art world to be part of the team here at CAM. So thank you for joining us, and I want to thank all of you for coming tonight, and it feels like a family affair, and it's my favorite crowd because you guys really do love our core mission of this institution, which is the art that we show. So thank you for coming tonight, and Dominic Molon.
Thanks, Paul. Is there like a cards game on tonight, or? It's all right. You know, so first slide. I have a lot of slides, and I'm going to talk like really quickly because I just have so much I want to get through. Was it fate? This is me, Paul, and Paul in Munster, Germany in 2007. We just kind of ran into one another in this installation by Dominique Gonzalez Forster with this mini Richard Serra, just out there. Was it fate? Was it coincidence? I don't know. But I am so very pleased to be invited to be here at CAM St. Louis. So many people ask me, so you were an artist? I mean, like cab drivers and waitresses and people like that. When I tell them I'm a curator, and it's like, no. I have an amazing appreciation for artists because I would be a really terrible one. This is a piece that I did at the invitation of some friends who actually are artists. They did a project where they invited everyone to kind of make work based on a verb, and on an active verb. So my verb is photographed, and so what I did was I made a photographic series based on this movie Blow Up by Michelangelo Antonioni from 1966. You might want to correct me on that. But I love this movie, and so what I did was I had a photograph of me taking a photograph of the photograph that you see on the right, and then the crappy photograph that I took was exhibited alongside that. So, you know, real grad school stuff. This is one, not an artist, but this is also why I have such an immense appreciation for artists, for people who actually put it out there, for people who put something on the wall, claim it, and you know, profess to actually have it mean something. I think this is really a profound thing that artists do, and something that we really need to respect, and that's why I take really seriously my job to, you know, make their presentation of their work, you know, the most important thing. Which is why, you know, I don't know, I'm very content driven, I'm very subject matter driven. You'll see that in a lot of the projects that I've done. So I'm going to run through, you know, a few things that I've done at the MCA from beginning to actually end, and then try to go into what I really want to do, what I'll be doing in the fall here at CAM, and what I really want to be doing at CAM in the future if Paul lets me do it. So my first ever show at the MCA was Jack Pearson, sort of interestingly titled Traveling Show. The show didn't travel, but it was very much about Jack's like kind of, you know, is Jack Kerouacian interest in the American landscape and this notion of the road trip and travel and the things that happen on the road. And we'll see that come into play later on in something I hope to do here. And so this was you know, Jack's first show in the United States. My first show ever. I was like 25 years old, and it showed. It showed because Jack and I were, you know, back before the days of email and PDFs. You know, Jack and I were just sort of on the phone talking about how we would put this show together, how we would represent this first show of his in a United States museum, looking at his really romanticized, nostalgic view of the American landscape. And so when he just subdivided this little sort of narrow gallery. Jack was still an emerging artist at the time. Now he's like taking pictures of Courtney Love and like, getting, gigs for Vogue. But Jack did this, nice simple setup of the gallery, this long, narrow gallery, where he divided it into 3 different rooms. And so, give me some water too. So Jack, when we were looking at the floor plans, said, could you paint the back room blue? And I thought he meant, the back third of the gallery that he'd subdivided, but he actually meant this little on the lower left right-hand side. You can see it, this little room where the elevator rides. He just wanted to kill and deaden that space. But I thought he meant the back third. So that when he came to Chicago, he's like, oh, I meant that room. So as a 25-year-old curator, first show right out of grad school, I'm really sweating bullets, and but he was like, no, it's okay, I'll make it work. So what he did was he hung that sort of like really lovely, his blue period of blue gouaches across that sort of divide between the gallery, and really saved my butt, and I was really appreciative of that. Sometimes like the really wonderful things, and you'll see this in, I think, in other exhibitions, happen when things happen accidentally in exhibitions. Skipping ahead to 2000, Tobias Rehberger, The Sun from Above. This was a commission piece, thank you so much, that we did for the MCA's, the new MCA. This is like now jumping ahead to the MCA's new building, which was opened in 1996. Which was a commissioned project by the German artist Tobias Rehberger, who was part of a moment in the early 1990s into the 2000s. Artists kind of often referred to as relational aesthetics, artists who really kind of engage the viewer very actively and directly, as including them in the art experience. We invited him to make a project that really worked with the MCA's plaza space, really invited him to activate that space with a project that people directly involved with. He had done a piece at the Manifesta show in Luxembourg in 2000 that made this kind of garden sculpture where plants, mostly plants that you could actually eat, basil and mint and rosemary, etc., were planted in these beautiful arrangements and made this kind of abstract shape when you saw it from afar, but then you would actually pick the plants. So on the right is what he had originally proposed, and if we were to have done that project with all these custom-made planter beds and so forth, it probably would have bankrupted the museum. It would have easily been, I don't even want to think about how many millions of dollars it would have been. And so we went through all these permutations, all of these hand-wringing exercises, and Toby finally had the rather brilliant idea to kind of make these more modular structures that the construction guys could build, and then to let the plants themselves kind of dictate the shapes and forms and colors. As it was, this show, this project cost, it kind of, you can see it kind of went right into the museum. It probably cost about as much as one of the big exhibitions at the MCA would have cost. It was really quite extraordinary. I actually thought I was a landscape architect for a while. I kind of lost the picture of like being a curator. I was just obsessed with just getting, this thing built, and you can kind of see the pieces that was going into play. But this is, Paul, I'm not going to try and do this here, but this is really kind of something I want to do with our building here, is to really kind of try and get the CAM a little bit more present and visible within not only the city but also within the sort of immediate surroundings. And I think artists are really, when you give them the opportunity, when you invite them to do things, they can really do amazing, magical things when you do that. This is probably the show that I'm, in either good or bad ways, most known for. Sympathy for the Devil, Art and Rock and Roll, since 1967. as David Foster Wallace said, a supposedly fun thing I'll never do again. It was really a passion project. My being here, my wanting to be a curator really came out of listening to a lot of progressive rock music in the 1980s when I was a high school student, and particularly this band Wire. Wire were all art students in England in the late 1970s, formed a band, but like so much of their aesthetics, so much of their performances were really informed by avant-garde art. And this exhibition that I wanted to do was really a way to pay back the way that art and rock have influenced one another and really have this amazing symbiotic relationship. Peter Saville, amazing graphic designer originally from Manchester, now based in London, did the graphic design for bands like Joy Division and New Order in the late 1970s and into the 1980s. Peter is revered by contemporary artists. Slater Bradley, who had a show here, was part of the rock and roll show. Wolfgang Tillmans, Robert Longo, all consider Peter a huge influence. He was in the show, and again, looking at those album covers, they taught me as much about minimalism and conceptual art as looking at Donald Judd or Joseph Kosuth. Scott King, who's going to be part of our upcoming Front Room project that he did with Kevin Cummins, that was in the show. The lead singer of Joy Division, Ian Curtis, and these various kind of very dynamic positions that he would wind up in when performing, and Scott creating these kind of swirls around that. Rita Ackerman did a wonderful piece for the MCA's lobby space. It was crazy. She was flinging paint around. It really was great to see an artist kind of working in the museum lobby until people started getting spattered with paint because she was wearing her iPod and like iPod, whatever, and not sort of paying attention to what was around her. But she made this crazy, insane, beautiful rock and roll piece on PVC, so it had that real feel of rock and roll. Tody Orsler, a series of video projections, all of these different great experimental rock musicians like Kim Gordon and Lee Ronaldo from Sonic Youth, or Tony Conrad, all sort of experimenting and improvising. And so when Tony puts them together in a space on 7 different suspended screens, they kind of make this, happenstance experimental rock concert. Dave Muller and Pedro Bell. Pedro Bell made these incredible, he's the one on the right, he made these incredible, insane album covers for Funkadelic in the 70s and 80s. And I broke my own rule. I wasn't going to show album cover art, but Pedro's work was just so influential on people like Mike Kelly, other people in the show, that I just had to include it. And then Dave Muller, you see this kind of beautiful, this kind of interesting kind of landscape, this cross section of a landscape, and it's all sort of like these different topographical sort of timeline of rock and roll. But what happens is that the big black square where the disco ball is not only where punk happens, but also where disco happens. And so it's sort of this comment on how this sort of big black negative of punk, but also that big black negative of disco kind of killing rock and roll. Christian Marclay, I think this wound up being about 500 records on the floor, creating this completely new sculptural surface. It was a little bit really fun, but also a little bit heartbreaking to pick all these records that I really love and put them on the floor and have people just step on them and kind of trash them. Recreate here of Venetia. I wanted to, this is a piece that people actually could make time to use the space and actually perform in and cut a demo tape in. And I really wanted to have people playing rock and roll within the space of the exhibition. And so, that in some ways I guess was successful. And Jim Lambie, I mean, Jim is like the show defined. I mean, he's a Scottish artist. He was with a band called the Boy Hairdressers, DJs all the time, but his work is very much about translating the energy and spirit of rock and roll into sculptural form with these kind of cut vinyl pieces that cover the entire space of a floor, but also this piece, one of his pieces called The Birds, where he has these bird sculptures that are poured on with paint, and then, compresses the spray paint. Spray paint was fun because you couldn't get it in Chicago. We had to like try and get it through customs, and it just became this like complete nightmare to actually get the right spray paint. But Jim is absolutely brilliant. Sort of brings that kind of rock and roll intensity to sculptural form. And then maybe my apology for the rock show. A lot of people like got really pissed off about the rock show, and I think it's because people really love rock and roll, and they have a very personal love for it. They, you know, like certain bands, and I think people responded very personally to the rock show. And I actually had to like run and hide, and I couldn't like listen to rock and roll for like 2 years after the show. I was so traumatized by it all. It got better as it traveled to like Miami and Montreal, but like still. The next thing I wanted to do was much more of a sort of serious academic show, but also one that really kind of fleshed out my love for artists and their world. And so Production Site, the artist studio Inside Out, was a way of looking at how artists today are kind of representing their own studios. And so you see, you know, these kind of pictures of from the past on the top right. Courbet's look into his own studio from the mid 19th century, but also this iconic image of Lee Bonteque in her studio, but even the way that pop culture has framed artists within the studio. The Big Lebowski, Maud Lebowski, I couldn't help but put that one in. The show featured 9 artists, all from, you know, William Kentridge from South Africa, looking at the studio and working in their studio and depicting themselves working in the studio. This amazing 9-projection piece by William Kentridge, where you see him drawing himself in the center, in the screen on the right, and then dissolving into his own drawing. Just really fascinating. Amanda Ross Ho, a young artist from LA, who excised the 9 walls from her previous studio and created these beautiful, huge sculptural collages out of those works. Peter Fishley, David Weiss, 136 cast polyurethane objects that replicate their studio in Zurich. Talk about obsessive. And Nikhil Chopra, once again, as with the rock and roll show, I couldn't do a studio show without having a live artist kind of working within the space and performing and kind of really energizing the space as a studio space. And so Nikhil creates these amazing performances. He's from Mumbai, India. And I actually saw his work at the Venice Biennale. I made my poor darling fiancée, Lara, like go walk like all the way back through the Arsenal to see this like piece by Nikhil Chopra. But it was so worth it because he's an amazing artist. He created this incredible performance where he, for 2 days, lived within the museum and created these this drawing on the wall that kind of blackened the walls. And then he went through these different costume changes where he was going through these different identities of himself, kind of acknowledging or referencing his grandfather, who was an artist in India at the beginning of the 20th century, and sort of this 19th century dandy character. And so, you know, really, I think it was a huge success. And then a piece that wasn't in the show that I really, sometimes I think exhibitions are not so much about the work that's actually in the show, but sometimes it's more about the work that doesn't. It's more about the process. And this was a piece that I'd gone to LA, I'd met with Paul McCarthy. I really wanted this piece for the MCA show. Sorry, it was a piece called The Box, obviously, from 1999. It was a 13-foot long by 19-foot high by 53-foot long container-sized space that was basically Paul's entire studio, former studio in Altadena, California, condensed into this space and then flipped on its side. And everything had to be installed like basically anew, and so all these things had to be re-pieced together on their side within the space. We had the space to do it theoretically, but since the MCA's ceilings are 20 foot high and the galleries that the show is in, and the piece is 19 foot high, and you need about 4 feet high to kind of above to like actually kind of work within it, just wasn't going to happen. The only other place we could have done it was in the MCA's atrium. And try telling your special events people that a piece that's going to cost basically the cost of the show is also going to eliminate all of the revenue for 3 months in our atrium space for special events. Not going to happen. I have to give credit to my former director, Madeline Grenstein. She said, "Dominic, you're really sure?" It's like, Madeline, believe me, you'll be thanking me later. But, you know, coulda, shoulda, woulda. Would have been great, but, you know, so it goes. Right now, I just a couple of weeks ago opened my last official project with the MCA Chicago, yay, of amazing artists who just won Britain's coveted Turner Prize, Susan Philipsz. It's a project called We Shall Be All. There's Susan in the lower right-hand corner. Susan works primarily and almost exclusively with sound. I unfortunately don't have a clip from the project, and I would not dare to sing the beautiful way that Susan sings, but she uses her own voice. She sings these very meaningful songs that comprise the work of art. And so We Shall Be All is, it's taken, the project is really kind of looking, I invited Susan to do this project specifically for the MCA and for the MCA's collection, and she created a work very much about Chicago, looking at Chicago's labor history, looking at the Haymarket Affair of 1886 and the rioting that happened within that, and the people who died and the people who were put to death for inciting this event that happened as a result of people lobbying for better wages, for proper working rights. And so she created this beautiful piece, and of course this slide is really not going to do it justice. It's in a black space. All you hear is sound. You see this black projection of this text. First, she sings this amazing Scottish ballad that was popular at the time when, in 1886, when the Haymarket martyrs were put to death. One of the Haymarket martyrs, A. Parsons, sung this Scottish ballad, Annie Laurie, the night before he was to be killed, and so. You know, it was this beautiful moment, and the entire jail just sort of were completely wrapped. And so Susan sings this song to kind of evoke this this figure in history. And then the text that you see, I live a life intense divine. It's from a poem that was written by one of the French communists. We're talking like French communists from the late 19th century, really took the cause of the Haymarket martyrs to her her name is, oh, I'm forgetting it. But anyway, she really championed these people, and so Susan evokes her, I think it's Voltairine de Cleyre, who would testify and give testimonials to these people who died in the service of labor rights, and so Susan has the poem kind of projected in between the next song, the Annie Laurie song, and then the next song, which is Leonard Cohen's "Who by Fire," which is this beautiful meditation on death. And so it becomes this really moving memorial to people who've lost their lives in the struggle for labor rights. One of the most amazing things about it is that the show was partially funded by people whose money comes from International Harvester, which is where the Haymarket Riders started, at the doorstep of International Harvester's offices, Cyrus McCormick. So that's a funny irony for you. But it's up now. It's up through June 12th. So please, if you do get up to Chicago, go see the project. I'm really pleased with it. So Contemporary Art Museum, St. Louis. I'm really so amazingly proud to be here, to have been invited by Paul to curate here and direct the curatorial program here. And you know, I have three simple things that I think I want to do while I'm here. One is to continue doing the right thing, which is exactly what this institution's been doing to maintain the prescience and seriousness of the kind of programming in relationship to the art world. But I also want to make that program much more accessible and much more exciting to the audience here in St. Louis. You know, how our program can kind of really create a greater visibility for the museum within the locality, within the city. And how the building can be worked with to really kind of invite people in and sort of announce ourselves a bit more to our immediate surroundings. And I'd also like to find ways to really make the program a bit more culturally diverse and really reflect the amazing cultural diversity of the city here. But I'm really relishing the experience to kind of bring, you know, very present, very relevant, and very challenging contemporary art you know, from around the world here to St. Louis, and really to be part of the fabric of the city, to really be here. You know, I don't want to be in New York. I don't want to be in Los Angeles. I certainly don't want to be in Miami. There's many. I don't even want to be in Chicago anymore. I really want to be here. I'm so pleased to be here in St. Louis. I really want to get out and see galleries and see artists and really be part of the fabric here of the city and make this museum so relevant to what's going on here. So first thing I'm doing is bringing this incredible artist from Australia who's currently living in London, David Noonan, an artist that I've known for a number of years and I think is just doing amazing work. Funny thing, David, this is an installation view of his show at the Palais de Tokyo. David's last big major show at the Palais de Tokyo in France was done by, guess who? Anthony Herbermann, former chief curator at the Contemporary Art Museum, St. Louis. Great minds think alike, I guess. But David does this amazing work, kind of looking at taking these images from the hippie collectives and cults of the _60s, not necessarily, you know, Haight-Ashbury, but like, you know, kind of looking at the broader international phenomenon that was there, but also looking at experimental theater troupes from that time. David has a very personal history with this. He really grew up in this milieu, and it really shaped his identity, it really shaped his ideas. Everything I know, the only very little things I know about folk music, I know through David Noonan. But you see this kind of layering of images. He's creating a new photographic history. It really kind of looks at how history is told through images and how you can retell and create these new histories through these new recombinations. He's also fascinated with the fabrics that kind of go into the patterns that these people were wearing at the time and kind of layering the images over the fabrics. And then, you know, you kind of see the seams of these silk-screened fabrics that are kind of layered over one another to kind of create this different kind of sensibility. Well, also, this works from this incredible sculptural installation that he did at the Chisenhale Gallery in London a couple of years ago. He's actually going to be in a show at the Renaissance Society in Chicago called The Age of Aquarius that opens on Sunday. So I think it's very much in the air. There's very much something about these artists who kind of grew up with parents who kind of came out of this time period, who are really kind of looking back at the 60s and looking back at that moment. And these are these incredible works that he created using these kind of black fabric stretched on canvas, and he'd take bleach and just painstakingly, you know, kind of create these paintings by a sort of reductive process where the bleaching would kind of create the image, and this very different kind of process of that you wouldn't get with painting. It's very much a different kind of almost photographic process. A show that's not on the books, but I really, really want to do, please, Paul, is a show that looks at Route 66. Everywhere I go in the city, I've seen old historic Route 66. I've seen, you know, Chuck Berry, you know, St. Louis's famous son, popularized that song. This is Ted Drew's. You know, it's just such a part of the city, and as I made the trip from Chicago to St. Louis to open the Susan Philipsz show and come back, I went to the Route 66 Museum in Pontiac, Illinois. The nice two old ladies who let me in, and like, you know, it was full of like all kinds of like nostalgic crap from like the 50s and 60s, you know, these really touching photographs of these guys who were state troopers, you know. But you know, this myth still kind of like really holds and really kind of sustains, and I really want to do something that is very specific and local about St. Louis, but to invite internationally recognized artists, as well as artists, you know, from Chicago, from St. Louis, from everywhere that, you know, Route 66 kind of touches, to kind of make work or present work that kind of touches on this notion, to kind of open up this dialogue about the American landscape, about the road, and about the sort of fascination with it. So obviously, Jack Pearson, his sign letter works. Jack had this great comment when he gave the talk for my show back in 1995. He's like, "Why is it all Burger King? Why can't it just be Burma Shave?" For those of you born a while ago, you'll know what that means. And Mike Nelson, this piece called After Kerouac, all these sort of tires, these used tires that kind of, you know, run through the gallery and then put into this big pile. Or even Ruben Ochoa, a LA-based artist, Mexican-American artist. LA is where Route 66 winds up. Ruben's work is really kind of about taking sculptural form and looking at the road and doing that in very oblique and interesting fashion. And then Emily Jassi, an artist who splits her time between Ramallah and New York. This is a piece called From Texas with Love. It was filmed in West Texas, not necessarily around, on Route 66, but you know, it kind of deals with that notion of the road. And it was filmed in West Texas, driving for 1 hour without stopping. And the soundtrack that the guy is hearing is a compilation of 51 songs chosen by Palestinians living in Palestine. And Jassi asked, you know, if you have the freedom to get in a car and drive for 1 hour without being stopped. Imagine there's no military occupation, no stoppage by soldiers, no checkpoints and roadblocks, no bypass roads. What song would you listen to? So that's the soundtrack. So it's kind of combining this American landscape with something that's very culturally other. And you know, again, you know, choosing the road, this obsession with the American landscape of the road. I really want to kind of deal with Route 66 as a contemporary reality rather than this mystical, nostalgic kind of myth that it's accrued. And then artists of interest. You know, these are people who whose work really informs what I do. People I'd love to work with at some point. Arturo Herrera, an artist from Caracas, Venezuela, who I got to know when he was studying at the University of Chicago, Illinois at Chicago, like me in the 90s. He got his graduate degree there, but is now living in Berlin and making amazing work. This is a wall project of his at the Hammer Museum in Los Angeles, where he takes imagery from cartoons, from, you know, these things that are very benign, very much a part of our innocence and childhood, but they have this, you know, kind of weird sort of sexuality or bodily kind of sensibility to them. There's something kind of creepy and all too kind of visceral about them. These beautiful felt pieces where he cuts out these parts of large felt, and they have this very kind of, once again, the tactility of the felt, but also they kind of evoke these very mysterious sensibilities, but also these collage images that he creates out of children's coloring books, children's books, you know, these things that are very innocent, very pure, but then creating these very violent juxtapositions out of them, very influenced by surrealism. An artist, I think, is just like, and he hasn't really had a proper survey show in the United States, and so I just think that he really brings like everything to the picture. And in Pendleton, amazing young African-American artist living in Brooklyn. This is a piece called Band, where it's different images of the rock band Deerhoof while they're rehearsing. It's an allusion to Jean-Luc Godard's film called Sympathy for the Devil. Actually, Adam was in the show that I did, so it's nice to see he kept that theme going. But you know, that film by Godard showed the Rolling Stones kind of rehearsing over and over again, and then layering that with political diatribes and content. And so Pendleton is kind of updating that, looking at Deerhoof, and then layering in fragments of a 1971 documentary titled Teddy, about a young member of the Black Panther Party. And so while you hear Deerhoof kind of rehearsing this song, you hear these very agitated political statements kind of layered in. And it really kind of you know, Pendleton's kind of extending this history of Godard's interest in showing how if you mess with the form of film, if you mess with how a film is made, there is a sort of political content that can be derived from that. It's a real, like, not very grad school way of putting it. And then these beautiful Black Dada paintings where he associates, kind of mixes the pool between Malcolm X and Salawit and John Cage and Ami Baraka. And so one of these pieces actually just made it in the collection of MoMA. Way to go, Adam. But beautiful, you know, kind of mix of politicization and minimalism. Berlin-based Japanese German video artist named Hito Steyerl. Just someone I found out about reading Art Forum, reading Texture Kunst, just being aware of these things. And she does these incredible films. They're these a new way of making documentaries. The film still in the upper left is from a piece called In Free Fall, where she tells the story of the current global economic crisis, kind of through the example of this airplane junkyard in the Californian desert. And then on the lower right-hand corner, a still from a film called Lovely Andrea, where she kind of goes back into her own history. When she was in Japan, she was a model for one of these sort of Japanese bondage magazines. And so she did all this research kind of going back into her participation in this kind of pornographic subculture. And so it's this really fascinating kind of look and sort of takes apart all of these kind of roles and all these really challenging issues that are going on within that culture, in her own position in relationship to it. The Finnish filmmaker, video installation artist Alisa Attila. I actually did Alisa's first presentation at the MCA in a U.S. museum in 1999. She creates these incredible video installations where she does these really fantastic films that really touch on, this is a piece called House from 1999, looking at a woman sort of going slowly kind of mad within her own domestic space, but splitting that across 3 different screens and telling this one story by splitting the imagery across different screens. And then a piece called Where is Where that looks at this sort of Algerian political situation through these 2 young boys who are kind of, tells the story of them, again, splitting it across these sort of different screens, and then layering that with this sort of Finnish poet, and sort of morally untangle this kind of real-life incident that happens between these Algerian boys who murdered a French playmate during the Algerian War of Independence in the 1950s. Shifting gears, John Miller, really a New York-based artist, but someone who really kind of came up with that generation of Mike Kelly, Jim Shaw, looking at the more object aspects of our throwaway culture, either through making these sculptures and paintings where he'd coat everything in this very brown, poo-colored paint, and then later on doing the same kind of collages and conglomerations, sculpture conglomerations with this gold leaf, and so really kind of talking about the excess of our culture, this sort of sculpture on the lower right-hand corner, this kind of excess of plenty, and then in the upper left-hand corner, these paintings that he do of contestants in game shows. And he's since moved on to reality shows doing the same kind of flat painting style, where it's people kind of breaking down and crying, these kind of unexpected, like really moments of emotional excess within these very, we all know they're scripted, but like, I don't know. I don't think he's gotten to Jersey Shore yet, but like, these reality shows where everything is staged, but people still, have these meltdowns and sort of focusing on these, human psychological moments. And then Tom Burr, just visited him in New York. You'll see an image from the studio. This is a piece called Deep Purple. Tom really kind of puts a gendered take on minimalism. So if you think of this is an homage to Richard Serra's Tilted Arc. It's a piece where he sort of takes Tilted Arc and makes it purple to kind of really kind of change the, to make it softer, make it more feminine, make it a very different kind of experience than as we know, Serra's very leaden, heavy, masculine kind of sculptural presence. Christmas Collapse on the right, you see he tends to kind of create minimalist objects, but they always have this sort of narrative. They allude to people like Truman Capote. They have this very kind of different kind of humanized sort of take on them. On the left, you see a studio space with a new series of works that he's done using these radiators that have these like little touches, this sort of ribbon that then ends up touching this Playboy magazine from the 70s. And so once again, you know, kind of looking at the radiator as a very female form, as a very sexualized form in a way, and sort of flipping your understanding of this particular object into another place. And then Martin Boyce, incredible artist from Scotland, represented Scotland in the Venice Biennale in that last iteration. This is a piece called Some Broken Morning, done for the Sculpture Center, really looking at a recuperation of modernist structures and kind of making them, really looking at where they break down, but sort of like kind of making them work in a very sculptural fashion. You know, maybe some of the sort of like, you know, less glamorous moments in modernism. These are these kind of like, this was the Venice Pavilion in 2009. These sculptural, you know, these kind of concrete forms that kind of they're almost like stepping stones in a creek or in a river that you have to walk through to get through the space, and then these kind of paper, you know, leaves, making it, you know, kind of evoking this very fall kind of thing, and kind of looking at where modernism and natural forms kind of get together, and making them kind of work in a way that they've maybe failed in the rest of society and in the rest of culture. And then I was like, you know, Manchester United was supposed to be part of this. It was like advertised. I'm a huge British soccer fan. I'm not feeling so good about things these days. We've lost, like, you know, the last 2 games in really poor fashion. It's a passion of mine. It's a release. It's something that lies outside of my work life. But you'd be surprised. One of the artists I didn't show here in my presentation, Liam Gillick, is also a huge Man U fan. We would have meetings where we'd meet during matches and, like, you know, maybe get this much work done and this much football watched. But that's me at the Amsterdam in Tower Grove East. So yeah, I don't know. I'm a sports guy. And in a way, maybe it's great that I'm here. I get, you know, the sort of sports obsessiveness of the city. But I don't know. It's Meet the Curator. This is something that is you know, on the other plane of my thought process while I'm thinking about art and what I do here at CAM. But that's it. Thanks so much for coming out. And any questions, I'd be happy to take.